Alright, hey guys, and welcome to the first week of the Kingdom of Flesh Reboot. And in this sort of first week video, we're going to be covering everything that happened this week, what's going on with development, and where we are at the end of it. I've done this in a sort of different style of format, and I hope you guys really do enjoy this type of content. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first week. Yes, you must be wondering, iridescence. Why does everything that you do eventually come down to this sort of diagram looking thing that looks kind of really poorly drawn because I don't really draw very well? Well, the answer to that is that if you actually want to understand something about what we're really trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish, it's very useful to be able to graphically see what you want to do. So right here is what I would describe as the state diagram of how the game would go. So each individual state refers to a complete set of different behaviors, and what that means is it's something that's uniquely different than everything else, and it is something that occupies the majority of the processing time. So in this case, the state diagram is showing us a few things. So from start, this is where your program loads. There's nothing really here. It's pretty much just the initialization stage, and it's very brief and very painless. The next part is then going over to the splash. The splash is just going to be a very simple image or faded in image that draws onto the screen and then gets cleared back from the screen. It's very simple, and usually you can use that to asynchronously load textures and other data that you need at the same time, which would be pretty useful to do, but isn't necessarily a requirement. After a certain amount of time, sort of indicated by that time arrow thingy, that time clock, that goes to the menu itself. So this would be the main menu. You would see the title screen, and it would have everything there. It would have several different options, so like a single player sort of new/load system, and then it would also have probably a multiplayer system, an options screen alongside of something to probably quit the game as well. The quit state isn't necessarily shown here because that's just a state that doesn't exist. It's pretty much the end of all states. So pretty much then we want to go from the menu and we want to go to some of the other states. So the first one is going to be the option state. The option state would be something where you could configure and change your various options. If you're doing it in the menu, pretty much it's going to just lead to a separate state sort of running on top of the menu, and then just drawing over the menu and things like that. Same thing would happen on the client side, and basically those options would be affecting client side utilities and things like that only. So then in the new/load path, we would then go ahead and start up the server and the client, and I've drawn this little arrow here towards the server that says concurrent, because the server should be running at the same time as the client. This is how an internal client server system works. So we would have single player server and the single player client, which are concurrently running, and they have a transport layer between the two so that they can communicate. The transport layer in this case is going to be completely virtualized, and that's actually something that I need to implement. Meanwhile, if we went to the multiplayer side, we're pretty much just going to launch up the client and connect it with a transport layer, which is in this case a socket, to some external server running somewhere. And that's pretty much the basic description of what the state diagram shows. Alright, so I have a basic issue right now. I want to make a transport layer in order to basically have the client send messages to the server and things like that, and I don't really know what I'm doing with that, so I think I have to go ahead and design it. And to do that, I think I'll go outside and think about it for a while. Alright, so let's go ahead and demo some of the server code here. The server code, pretty much all it's doing is doing the bare minimum to create the server and start up the game. So right now, if I go ahead and run it, here we go. We're going to go ahead and start the server, create a socket and bind it and listen to it. And that's pretty much all that we're doing. The entire system here is designed pretty well. It can actually handle a client connection and send packets and handle packets. That's pretty much all the minimum that we really need for a server right now. And it's time to get started on working on the client. Okay, so I did a reasonably big job here. I created the entire client-side project, made some changes necessary to Stardust Engine, alongside basically set up the entire client for everything that we need here. And pretty much, if we go ahead and look at the code, it's pretty cool. Pretty much what we're starting off here is just starting up the game and then booting directly into the client state. That's obviously not what the state diagram shows, and I'll be working more on that on Wednesday probably to go ahead and make a nice like menu sort of thing for the client itself. Right now I've just made the client itself and everything that it needs. I've also set up a few things here. It creates a window with like this sort of dark purplish color and says Kingdom of Flesh on it. I probably should add something like a window icon, which I will need to implement myself. And then we're going to go ahead and do pretty much all we're doing is creating a client and then running the thing forever, allowing the client to update and do whatever it needs to do. Currently, the client update doesn't even do anything, but that's one thing to handle when we get there. One thing that I do need to do is create like a protocol and handler and all of that stuff, but that needs to be done pretty much after I've already gotten that done. So the sort of roadmap that I want to go ahead and lay out is going to be somewhere where I would have on Wednesday going to go ahead and make a nice pretty menu and things. Then the second thing I would do would go ahead and be creating some sort of client server protocol and defining that really well, making sure that's really easy so that we would have like KOF protocol something. And then next thing would be basically adding the server as a sub module and allowing single player playing of the game. And that's sort of what I want to get done this week. I want you to be able to go into the world and pretty much have some sort of communication system between the client and the server, regardless of your connection status or what mode that you are playing. So I'm going to go ahead and actually demo the system running right now. I have everything pulled up here, so I'm going to go pull up KOF server. Nothing really has changed on the server side since yesterday. So it just creates a server, and it's running in headless mode, which is a new thing that just kind of got added to Stardust. And the process memory is very minimal here, 1 megabyte. It's very efficient for just the server itself. For Kingdom of Flesh itself, let's go ahead and run it over here. It's just going to create a blank window right now, and it's going to connect to the server, which we can see here connected to 50. It connected from port 54764 to our server, which is on 5995. And it did it pretty quickly overall as well. One thing that I noticed is that the times aren't updating, and I need to figure out why that exactly is the case. I think it just has to be that the global delta time needs to be changed for the elapsed time over here to change. I think that's all I need to do, and that's pretty simple to go ahead and accomplish. Aside from that, we now have a working connection between this server here and this over here. If I go ahead and close out here, it's going to go ahead and disconnect. Alright, so let's take a look here. So what I've gone ahead and done is set up the entire client side of Kingdom of Flesh. If we go into our main CVP here, I've moved pretty much everything out to the state system. It's going to go through a basic splash screen like I showed on the splash diagram on the other day. It's also going to have a transition into a menu state, and inside this menu state, it's pretty much ripped directly from what's it called, Halloween Game Jam, and pretty much I use that for start, multiplayer, options, and exit. And then if you click on multiplayer, it goes ahead and launches up a client here. This needs to actually be embodied into a true client state at some point, so a true single player or multiplayer client state that does pretty much the same exact thing. In this case, we're going to go ahead and actually start running the program. But before I do that, I actually have to start up KOF server here. I'm going to start up the KOF server, and then I'll start up KOF itself. And then we can go ahead and see that it does Kingdom of Flesh. And then it starts up into this menu here. And in this menu, you can go up and down, select whatever. And then, well, exit obviously does exit. And then multiplayer, we hit it here. Going to go open a connection to 5995. Which goes ahead and creates a connection. It instantly closes here, but that's mainly due to not having implemented anything on the server side yet to actually handle a connection or do anything with it. So in this case, it's pretty much just doing absolutely nothing. And in this case, that's all we're going to do, and I'm going to close it off here. Alright, so today was Thanksgiving, so I went ahead and wrote up this KOF protocol here. The protocol sort of specifies the way that the client and the server are meant to communicate with each other. So in the protocol, packets are basically going to be structures which have a variable integer length followed by an 8-bit ID, and after that the rest of the data is provided as specified by the specification. In order to log in, a connection is established from the client to the server. Both will exchange a handshake. So the client goes first with the handshake. If the username provided by the client is valid, the server will allow you in. Otherwise, the server would disconnect you with 0x00, which is the disconnect packet, and state the reason. The client must at least receive an initial position and 3x3 blocks of chunks to start. The inventory will be sent alongside of a hotbar selection. The client calculates physics and moves within the player world, and the keep alive packet is sent every 5 seconds to verify the connection state is valid. So looking at that, things that are bound to the client, which means that they're going towards the client. The first one could be disconnect, which is going to have a reason as a string attached. The next thing would be player position. Player position has a specific ID, and then this player position ID has however many fields here, and these fields are going to be X and Y, so your position in the game. Next thing would be the inventory set. Inventory set will be a packet that goes there. It tells you the position within the inventory, which is an integer index, alongside of an item ID. The next sort of packet I've basically described here is the chunk packet, which is 0x03. It describes CX and CY alongside of the data inside. CX and CY are the chunk X and Y positions, and then the data itself is 256 array of U8s, which means that chunks are 16 by 16. The handshake packet is the last packet, provided with the maximum number here as the ID. The protocol ID of the server is U8. Then it would go ahead and do the server version, major, minor, and revision. And this is pretty much just to tell the client a little bit of details about what server it's joining. And the client can check that if it's possible to connect to. Server-bound packets are from the client going to the server. First one would be a disconnect, and why would the client disconnect? This is just kind of a logged reason. It doesn't really have any real value here, and in fact maybe I'll implement it without even including a reason here, just being as a blank packet. The player position is another thing here. It's going to be the position that's sent from the client to the server. This is the most common one that's going to be sent, and it's going to have 001. And then finally the handshake will have the protocol ID of the client, the username, and the UUID of the unique player. Anyways, I'll go ahead and work on implementing these, and hopefully we'll be able to see it. Alright, so here we go. I've actually gone ahead and implemented the way that protocols should work. I have a very basic sort of implementation of the protocol system, and I will need to work a little bit more on this to get it fully polished and stuff. However, I can show the most basic thing here, which is if we go ahead and open up our Kingdom of Flesh server. We can go ahead and start up the server here, and then we can start up the game. If we just simply open up the server here and make a multiplayer connection, you'll notice that we receive a packet that says packet ID 255, and that is the current connection packet. I'm recording this on a Sunday, of course, but we can also notice here that if we go ahead and look at it, we can see that we have protocol ID 1, followed by the string test user, followed by some of the various fields for the UUID here, which pretty much is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Alright, so this concludes the first sort of week here of Kingdom of Flesh development. This week was kind of slow. I mean, it had a holiday in the middle of it and all of that too. And pretty much all we did was we went ahead and set up all of the core fundamentals for Kingdom of Flesh to be a great game. We went ahead and actually started from zero, and now we have a competent client-server system, which I will work on continuing to improve and also integrating together using a virtual transport layer on Monday. Kingdom of Flesh has been really fun to work on so far, and I've enjoyed all of the sort of testing and all of the entire process of developing this game as it's gone by in this past week. Hopefully next week we can go ahead and finish up all of this sort of basic setup stuff of the core game systems and game mechanics, and then we can actually go ahead and work on making stuff look pretty on screen. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video.